Hello, PriceSmart. Welcome to our podcast, At the Club, a communication channel with our employees, where we will share valuable information, fascinating topics, and inspiring stories that you haven't heard before, keeping us connected on a whole new level. Join us on this journey and discover everything happening at the club. PriceSmart Inc. provides this podcast for general information. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are the personal views of the podcasters and their guests, and not the views, policies, or opinions of PriceSmart. PriceSmart makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. This podcast might contain forward-looking statements concerning PriceSmart's anticipated plans, revenues, and related matters. These statements are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially, including the risks detailed in PriceSmart's most recent annual report on Form 10-K and other filings with the SEC, which are accessible on the SEC's website at www.sec.gov.
I came from operations, and from operations, all of a sudden I assumed the member experience role, the real estate construction role, the logistics role, the merchandise role, and the human resource role, and the B2B role. You know, I think back on my personal story, kind of growing up as a kid in PB, playing tennis, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and how fortunate I was latch on to Price Club at the time. My boss at the time, Neil Harris, called me into his office. He said, "Listen, I got to tell you, you really did a poor job of opening up, but we're going to give you a second chance." I mean, one day a dream would be just to hook up a Airstream to the back of my pickup truck and just go visit every state in the union and spend some time in Alaska.
Welcome to another episode of the At the Club podcast. It's great to have you all here. This is PriceSmart's employee, member, and just general stakeholder podcast where we talk about all sorts of topics related to management, leadership, our company philosophy, merchandise, and much more. So great to have you here. John, welcome.
David, thank you.
Yeah,
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, for sure. I really wanted to save you to the last episode of this year, but I'm happy that we're doing this now. Just for all of our listeners, our guest today is John Hildebrandt, PriceSmart's president and COO. John's been with our company about 45 years and started actually at Price Club and has been in his current position since 2023. John's one of the people I work with most closely at PriceSmart, and also one of the people I probably learned the most from at our company today. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast because I know we have lots of stories to dig into. And one of the ones that I just want to jump right in is really your personal story and how you came to the company. And yeah, I think we should jump right in.
Okay.
And so I got my notes here. So tell us about, I guess, what was your first job?
My humble beginnings.
Yeah. What was your first job at a Price
So
type enterprise?
it's a great story. I was in high school. I was a senior in high school, living at home, and my mother was constantly, encouraging me to get out of the house and at least get a part-time job, do something. And because all I used to do was play tennis. I'd go to school and play tennis. And she said, you got to get out. She ended up having a friend of hers who was a buyer at a business called Price Club, which I had never heard of. So one day she said, "John," she goes, "tomorrow I got you an interview at Price Club." And I said, "What's that?" She goes, "Well, I'm going to take you there and you're going to see what Price Club is." So we got in the car. We drove down it was the only Price Club at the time. This was in probably August of 79.
Wow. So Price Club had been open about
3 years.
And you were living in San Diego.
I was living in Pacific Beach, San Diego. Yeah. Yep. So I got out of the car. Her friend, her name was Sharon Lankus, who was an office supply buyer at the time, met my mom and myself at the front door, introduced me to a gentleman named Joe Uchek, who happened to be the club manager at the time. The interview process was interesting. Joe just walked me in onto the front end and he said, "You see what those kids are doing there?" And at that time, our cashier processing system there was no UPC back then. We had all the merchandise was marked with item numbers.
Yeah.
So
So for our listeners, the UPC codes are the numbers under the barcode.
correct.
Yep.
So what I saw a cashier, and then I saw an individual working with a cashier transferring merchandise from one basket to another, calling out the number. And I said, "Oh yeah, I see what they're doing." He goes, "Well, that's what you'll start doing, and we'll see, you can be here tomorrow at 9 a.m."
Hell of an.
So that was that.
All right.
So the next day, I showed up, and I will tell you, within an hour, I was like, this is just a great place to work, because everybody was 17, 18, 19 years old. Everybody had a ton of energy. Everybody was having fun at work. Oh, and let me mention something. Price Club at the time was probably the highest payer in the San Diego market. I started out at $3.60 an hour, and that was big money.
What was minimum wage then? Do you remember?
Probably $1.25, $1.50 an hour at that time.
Imagine.
Yeah. So I started it was called calling. So you would ask the member for their card, you'd give it to the cashier, and the cashier happened to be a long-term, moody individual, I'll put it that way. And by the end of the day, the supervisor called me over and said, "I think we have to find something different for you, John. You just called too slow." Okay. So the next day, I was assigned to the parking lot to gather up shopping carts. And it's interesting because at that time I met a couple of individuals that, at that time I surely didn't know this, but I would but I would get to know these individuals. One person's name was Tom Martin, and the other was Casey Breen. And so they taught me the ropes of pushing shopping carts, letting me know that, all you need to do is wear your shorts, because there was no shirt necessary. You can get a suntan during the job, all day long. And it was a great job.
So Tom and Casey, of course.
So Tom Martin went on to become our CMO. Yeah, exactly. With PriceSmart, Casey went on to become vice president with Price Club. So anyway, those were the humble beginnings.
That's pretty amazing.
Those were the humble beginnings.
Yeah.
From there, though, I realized, you know what? I'm not so sure I want to be spending all my days, outside, in the sun, just pushing shopping carts. So I found I ended up getting back inside, and I started again working on the front end, became a cashier, got interested in merchandising. I really wanted to know, because it was that was a group, the merchants. Those were everyone admired the merchants. Oh, you're just a cashier, but the merchants, they're the tough guys. Those are the guys you want to be. So
these were the merchandisers in the club.
These were the merchandisers in the club, the stockers. We'll call them the stockers. Mm-hmm. So, and at that time, David, everything came in brown boxes. Everything had to be cut open. Everything had to be labeled. So it was a lot of physical work. So I went out there, did that for a while. And right about that time, that was about a year and a half. About 1980, 81, Price Club had opened up a second club in Phoenix, Arizona, and then had come back and opened up a third club in Santee. And then they were going to go north to the Bay Area, to Redwood City. And I realized then, you know what? A lot of these people that I've seen so far in the last 3 years, they haven't moved. There's been very, very, very little upward mobility. So I realized at that time, you know what? If I want to grow, I'm going to start moving around and see how it goes.
So even at that age, you were very motivated to grow within the company.
Well, I was going to college at San Diego State University, and not really at that time knowing what I wanted to do, but I really became really attracted, and just the idea of what we were doing at the time, watching members come in and buy in bulk, and just the comments as a cashier, listening to them saying, I'd come in here to spend $50 and I'm spending $250, and it was busy. I mean, the people, Price Club at that time was just starting to take off, and
had energy.
There was a buzz about it.
Right.
So when the opportunity came to move north, I said, why not? So a friend of mine, we went up there. We moved up to Redwood City, and I became part of an opening team. So not knowing the first thing about, and that was Price Club at the time. There were the processes, procedures, they just didn't exist. We were making these things up as we went. And so, and obviously I think we did a pretty good job at it. So
I'd say so.
We opened up Redwood City. From there, an opportunity at that time, we had Saul your grandfather and then your dad had signed a joint venture deal with a company in Virginia to do a joint JV on the East Coast to open up a Price Club. And that didn't work out that well. And we ended up buying out, their interest in the business. So I was asked, hey, how would you like to go to Virginia? And again, single at the time, I said, yeah, I'm going to jump on the opportunity. So I got another promotion, went to Virginia Beach, spent a little time there. Then I went to Richmond, Virginia. Then from there, I was asked to open up a club, become a warehouse club manager. I think I was 24. I was one of the youngest club managers in our history at the time. So I went to Fairfax, Virginia.
Imagine the responsibility for a
24-year-old. Again, very, very little sleep, a lot of butterflies every day of the week.
For sure.
And really, again, not understanding so many different aspects of the building, running that business. The administrative side was all new to me. I mean, obviously I knew, what a club should look like, how the front end should run, how the receiving area should run. But administratively, I didn't know the first thing about, making sure that things were rolling, running smoothly. So we opened that up. About 4 months later, my boss at the time, Neil Harris, called me into his office. He said, listen, I got to tell you, you really did a poor job of opening up, this club. But we're going to give you a second chance. So we want you to go up to Connecticut because we're going to open up a club in Connecticut. And he kind of winked because I knew that, he was joking, but he was serious about it. What ended up happening is we ended up, I guess, my admin manager wasn't the best, and we had a lot of invoices that weren't paid for months at a time. And again, that was obviously not the right thing to do. So, whoops.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went up to North Haven, Connecticut, outside of the New Haven area. And at that time, I had learned a lot from the first club opening. So I was much better prepared. And we had a very, very successful opening. And shortly after opening, and this is a life lesson that I learned that has followed me through my entire life, and I've tried to teach other people this, share my experience. At the time, we didn't see your dad that often. Your dad was on the West Coast. Saul was still active in the company. And I got noticed that Saul and Robert were going to come to visit. So, of course, it's all hands on deck. Let's get the club, as good looking as possible. Let's make sure that everything is perfect. And most importantly, make sure you know your numbers. Because when Robert and Saul came, at the time we carried about 3,000 items. And their expectation was, you know what, you'd better have a pretty good idea of what every item is doing in the club, at least the items on the end caps. And so I was prepared. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna really impress, Robert and Saul on this floor walk. And the walk went very well. And I was feeling very, very, very good. And about 3/4 of the way through the walk, Robert asked me a question about an item. And I honestly, I blanked. And I did not know the answer. And I probably could have made up a number and just, hope that he wouldn't double check on me to see if that number was correct. But I told Robert, Robert, I don't know. I honestly, I just don't know the answer to your question. But you know what? I'm going to find out and I'm going to get back to you. So the point of the story was a couple of days later, my boss, at the time, called me and he said, John, I got to tell you, the floor walk went well. He said, but I got to tell you, that comment that you made to Robert and to Saul was very, very impressive. And it reflected a lot on your character about, what, you were honest enough to say you didn't know. And you had the courage to say you didn't know. And you would find out and get back to them. And so I've kind of, kept that thought with me through my career. And as I have mentored many, many managers and people that, direct reports, non-direct reports, I've tried to let them know the same thing. It's okay to not to know every answer to every question, because we don't, and we're not going to. But try never to, not tell the truth. Try to just be honest and say, you know what, I'm not sure, but I'm going to find out and let you know.
Yeah.
And that has, I think, served me very well through my, my career.
I think it's a really important point. We often talk about continuous learning, continuous improvement as a quality that we look for in talent and and future leaders, current leaders at our company. And I think one of the most important pieces of that, I mean, there's a couple, but for sure curiosity and the willingness to ask what maybe feels like a dumb question or to say you don't know. I always say there's no dumb questions.
Well, David, and
Actually, if you have a question, somebody else probably has that same question.
And, that's what's amazing about our business. And I've been walking the floor for, 45 years, probably the last 40 in a managerial role. And, the beauty of this business is you continuously learn. Today was a great example. We take some steel down, we move the merchandise a little bit this way, a little bit that way, and look how the members react.
Right. Yeah. For our listeners, should have told you in the beginning, but we're in Bogota, Colombia. And so we walked a couple locations today. And one of the cool things that our team did today was actually adjust this week, adjust the layout of one of our locations. So I always describe us as tinkerers.
We're tinkerers. Exactly.
We're always trying to improve. We're always looking at what we could do better, and we're never satisfied. So,
and I think, what goes along with that is, and what's probably even more important behind that is the fact that, we've taught our management to be entrepreneurs.
That's right.
And to not be afraid to try things differently. We don't send down directives on planograms that everything has to go in a certain way. And that in itself has really helped create a lot of great ideas. I call it the bubble up process, where the majority of the great ideas come from our people as they're on the ground.
People are on the floor. Actually, something occurred to me on the walk today. So our club manager, Elder, I was kind of observing how he had laid out the merchandise and how he had put all these kind of toys and accessories for babies together. And nobody told him to do that. And I could see the sense of pride on his face as he kind of showed us that area, how he had merchandised the space. And every club is different when you walk in. Sure. In general, each run has the same sort of departments and categories.
Correct.
But we're moving stuff around, not so much that it's going to piss off the member, but we want to make sure people see things that they didn't expect to see and buy things that they didn't expect to buy.
I agree. I mean, I think it's, and again, let me reflect back on a couple other stories that I want to share.
Go ahead.
First.
Yeah, please.
And this goes back again to your grandfather. And I'm probably one of the few people within the company today that can say that I actually was working with Saul when Saul was actively involved in Price Club. And again, I'll never forget. I was in Connecticut. It was about 7:30 at night. I was at my desk and I was looking at a payroll report. And there was nobody in the offices. Everybody had gone home. The front end manager was running the club, and I was just again taking a look at the payroll report. And I heard this, Hildebrandt, you're still trying to figure it out. And those are your grandfather's exact words. And I looked up, and there was Saul. And it was February, and so he had this long winter coat on, this big hat on, heavy hat on, and
I can picture it.
I almost fell off my chair, and I'm like, "Wow, Saul, great to see you. How you been?" And he said, he goes, and he always called me Hildebrandt. Never my first name. Never my first name. He goes, Hildebrandt. He goes, you know what? I got to tell you something. I saw an employee out there on the floor standing there. We're paying them. You're paying them, and they're not doing anything. And I'm like, so what do you mean? He goes, you want me to show you? And I said, please, let's go see. I got to see this. So we walked out to the floor.
God only knows what he was doing in Connecticut.
I have no idea. I wasn't going to ask. But anyway, we walk out to an end cap, and he's standing there, and he's looking at me. And there's no employee around. And he goes, do you see it? Do you see that? And I'm like, Saul, I don't see the employee not doing anything. He goes, it's not an employee, John. Look, there's no sign on this end cap. So this is like an employee standing here you're paying to do nothing. Because if a member can't see the price of a merchandise, how do you think you're going to sell it?
I haven't heard that one before.
That was another one that just stuck with me for a long time. So anyway, those are some fun stories from the old days.
Yeah, retail is detail.
Absolutely,
basics.
And it's basic. It's a lot of blocking and tackling. But again, it's a very creative environment that we have in our clubs that we talked about earlier. That the managers, the department managers, they have the opportunities to tinker a little and to try to find ways to either drive sales or be more productive. And again, one of the roles of our regional managers, because what happens, David, is a club manager, if they stay in a club for a period of time, it would happen to you, it would happen to me. What happens is you start to get blinders on. Because if you're in one place long enough, you start to miss some of the things going on around you. So one of the roles of our regional managers is they visit the clubs. Obviously, they're making sure the standards are correct, and they're talking to the employees and making sure that the employees feel they're being treated correctly. But they're also looking for what we call best practices, and that's part of their responsibility, because they'll pick up ideas that maybe one club manager or a department manager, or could be a marketing manager, had done on their own, and the results were great. So their job is to make sure that those best practices are shared around the company.
Totally. So I'm going to fast forward in your career, because of course, Price Club ended up merging with Costco, creating Price Costco. There was a demerge. Costco acquired or bought out through the demerge a number of many locations, including the United States, correct, Mexico, Canada, South Korea. I think that's it. I think those are the big ones.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Canada. Yeah, Canada. Yeah.
So out of that, of course, Robert tells the story. We ended up with a real estate company, and then there was a spinoff of that to create a PriceSmart, which was actually first a Price Costco, and so it eventually became PriceSmart. And of course, you were involved at the very, very beginning of PriceSmart. And I'm curious about, what were you doing when PriceSmart first got going? I know at some point you moved out of the United States, and I would love to hear. Where did you move to, and what was that experience like being an expat and living abroad, opening up?
Well, I'll back up. There was a section of time there where we were called Price Enterprises, excuse me, and we had a business model where we were actually selling know-how. So we would find a licensee partner in Asia at the time, and we would make a deal with a retail partner to go over there and to teach them how to build, operate, and merchandise the club format. So we tried that for a little bit. So I spent some time in the Philippines working with a partner there. Great experience.
I bet.
But that we realized very quickly that, again, we don't do well with partners, and we really want to control, A to Z. So we kind of folded up our tents overseas. We came back, and at the time, from the split of Price Costco, when we split, we did retain the one club, the Price Costco in Los Pueblos, Panama. So I moved from the Philippines to Panama, and it was again, it was a great experience. Obviously, different culture, and one of my regrets, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but one of my regrets is I really didn't take the time to immerse myself and learn the local language. And I felt that that's hindered me, and it's also made me communicating to a lot of lower level employees more difficult. And that's something that I personally enjoy doing, is teaching. And so I have to teach through people who can interpret for me.
Right.
So anyway, at the time we had the one club, the Price Costco, and it was a struggle. We were really, trying to figure out, how to make things work. Systems-wise, we didn't have the greatest system, and we didn't have a great buying team, because most of the talent actually went with Costco. So I
think they offered just about everyone a job.
Oh, everyone had the opportunity to go. I had the opportunity to go as well. And Jim Cynical personally came to me and asked me to move up to Kirkland. And, I thought about it for about 5 minutes, and I gave him my answer right then and there. And I said, Jim, I appreciate the offer, but honestly, Robert and Saul gave me an opportunity as a kid, and I feel a sense of loyalty I'm not sure where this is going to go, but I felt as almost part of family, a distant family member, but I felt that connection with your dad and your grandfather at the time. So I said, thanks, Jim, but I'm going to see where this leads us. So we got off to a slow start. There's no doubt we got off to a slow start. But we then opened a second club in an area called Via Brazil, which was a much better location from a demographic perspective, more high-end members.
We ended up closing Los Pueblos.
In time we did. That's correct.
Via Brazil, of course, has gone on to be one of our very best locations.
So, yeah, back then we had Via Brazil and Los Pueblos, and I think our goal at that point was, listen, we want to validate that this model will work, and we want to validate that we can make it work. Our buying team, our accounting team, our logistics team, marketing, all the departments, and we actually turned a profit in the second year. And at that time, the CEO at that time was very ambitious, and we said, okay, we validated this model, so let's go out and let's get some scale. To which we did, and there was a period of time over 15 months where we opened up 11 clubs in 3 different countries, and with about 6 what we call expats at the time, and the expats were the experienced, folks that, from the Price Club days that had come with us, that would move country to country to country, staying for 6-7 months at a time, helping teach, open, teach, and then move on to the next project. So we had some very, very dedicated folks, putting in a lot of time, sacrificing a lot of their personal life to really getting this the space, at least, the scale of our operation up and running. And from there, we started to see some positive things go. And obviously, we continued to expand. I think the second from Panama, we go Guatemala almost simultaneously with Costa Rica and El Salvador, Honduras. The last country we opened was in Nicaragua, in Central America. And then obviously the DR, the rest is history. Aruba, Barbados, Jamaica.
Place that you live?
I had
Labrador favorite. So
no disrespect to all my friends in Panama, but I certainly enjoyed Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Costa Rica, the climate in Costa Rica was just more to my liking. Panama was a very hot and humid climate. A lot of expats and either Canadians, Europeans, Americans. I made a lot of close friends while living in Costa Rica, and so I would say that was probably my most enjoyable, expat assignment. And then from Costa Rica, ended up coming back to Miami.
Yeah. That's a wonderful experience, though, especially now with so much of our base of employees. I mean, we have 12,000 employees, and 80% of them are Spanish-speaking Latinos from various markets. And having lived there, I'm sure that really informs a lot of what you understand about culture, engaging with people, and every country is different. I'm sure having spent time in a number of places, I'm sure that informs how you engage with people and how you teach.
That's a great topic to discuss and to bring up, because you're right. In many ways, and I kept in contact with many of my friends at Costco, and financially they were doing very, very well. And I had friends that were retiring in their early 50s at the time because they had done so well. And I would always reflect back on, well, I could have done that, but I did this. And I will tell you, and I mean this, with all my heart, I think the experience of living in country and continuing today to continue to visit, the countries that we operate in, to interact with our employees, our members, to understand what we're doing. And I look at it as a mission. I like to call ourselves the Robin Hood of retailers, because when we go into markets, new markets, it's not only the members of PriceSmart that do well, but it's all the members that live in the areas that we open in, because every other retailer has to lower their prices. So everybody benefits when a PriceSmart comes in. So to your point, the experience was invaluable. And, as I think about the day that, there will come a day when I hang up my boots, so to speak, I think my legacy is going to be the relationship I've made with, folks from Guatemala to Trinidad to Colombia. I mean, it's just that to me is priceless, and it's very enduring to me.
Yeah, I'm sure you should be very proud. There is a price involved. PriceSmart, not totally priceless.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the things that I reflect on our employee base and our manager base is how many people that we have as now as country managers, regional VPs, SVPs, and so on, especially in operations, but not only, also in other areas, have grew under people like you, like Jesus Van Chong and Paul, Chris, and some of the original folks. And then, kind of there's even like a generation just after, like Ana Luisa and Sergio and Ana Beatriz. And now, those are,
and there's
and it kind of
today it keeps going.
It's amazing.
So David, on that, and again, going back and thinking about, I think back on my personal story, kind of growing up as a kid in PD, playing tennis, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and how fortunate I was to just latch on to Price Club at the time and to get to where I am today. But we have, and that speaks a lot about our culture. That was our culture, and it was the culture at FedMart, it was the culture at Price Club and at PriceSmart, and which has really given individuals the opportunity to really aspire and grow as far as they possibly can. And to your point, there's just too many. We don't have enough time in this podcast to talk about the individuals that had started at entry-level positions and today are at senior vice presidents, director levels, living that same story that I have. So again, that is another just very, important part of I think, of our legacy,
Totally.
What we leave behind.
I think it's so inspiring. It's
so
equally. Just to kind of like round out the professional side of your story. I know now for the last 2 years and change, you've now had, one of the most senior positions in the company. And I'm curious, if you could share with our listeners, like some of the things that you learned throughout your journey to this role today that you're applying today. And then maybe some of the things that you've learned since you've taken the role that inform how you manage and lead.
Yeah, that's a good question. I look back and I'll remember the day, David, where you and your dad and I spoke. We were in Costa Rica and we talked about the future. And John, this is what your role is going to be. And it was very exciting, the conversation. But the minute I got in the plane and started flying back to Miami, I'm like, oh boy, what's next? So, but honestly, in retrospect, applying a lot of the basic principles that I had learned over the years about, working with people. And I like to work, I don't like to say, people report to me, I'm their partner. I like to be more of a subservient type leader. I need to learn from them, their business, and then how can I help them? So coming into this new role, there was a lot of areas I had never had any experience in.
Yeah. So what areas are you responsible for now?
So
what areas are in your part of the business?
I came from operations, and from operations, all of a sudden I assumed the member experience role, the real estate construction role, the logistics role, the merchandise role, and the human resource role, and the B2B role.
Mm-hmm.
So it was taking on a lot. But the good thing is, and when I first came on, there were a couple of people that I just knew. You know what? I just recognized that these weren't the right leaders for the role that they were in, at the time.
Yeah.
And I knew to move the needle forward, we were going to have to, work with them and see if we could get them there. But if not, we'd have to make that tough call and move on.
The nature of
it's just how it works. So I was fortunate again to have. I had earned a lot of respect over my years as the EVP of operations, and then that crossed borders. I mean, I spent a lot of time working with all the buyers. I knew the buyers very well. I knew a lot of the logistics people, even the membership marketing. I knew a lot of our team members in country. So adapting to the new role in many respects wasn't as challenging as I thought it was going to be. But I will tell you, the area of logistics, which prior to taking on that role, I truly didn't understand the complexity or the importance of logistics in our business. And today, what I've learned over the last 2 years, again, I've come 360. I mean, I've really learned the importance of logistics, what it really means to, ultimately, to our members in the forms of the lowest possible price.
Right.
So again, just my style has always been, I like to communicate our direction with my direct reports, who I work with. I like to make sure we're all on the same page as far as what we feel the objectives are. I don't micromanage. I'm a believer in, giving each individual, their space to do their job. I don't meet with people every day. I set up consistent meetings, but some every week, some every other week, depending on the need. And I do a lot of what we call managing by walking around. So fortunately, in the offices in Miami offices, all of those direct reports are there for me. So it's very easy for me to get up and walk over to Juliana's desk and say, Juliana, listen, help me understand something, what's going over here, or to walk over to Paul's office and say, Paul, what's happening here in merchandising? Why are we seeing this happening? So there's a lot of that, and managing by walking around that takes place. But again, I try to respect everyone's time, and but I think I've also set ground rules with people that we have a job to do. We have an accountability. Each one of us, we have a very high role in the company, and the expectations, they're not unreasonable, but we can achieve them if we work together. And I think, and again, I'm a big believer in supporting the team and trying to give them the tools they need to get the job done.
Totally. Well, I wanted to first, thank you for sharing all the personal stories. And
no, my pleasure. I enjoy. You don't know if you can't tell. I enjoy talking.
I know you're one of the great storytellers in our organization, and storytelling is an important skill, I think, in leadership. And so much can be taught by way of story, and of course by experience. But thank you. It's
my pleasure.
Wonderful.
Again, my pleasure.
I wanted to just touch on a couple of topics, particularly for our employees. And there's two. And the first one is about something we talk a lot about in our business, and that's doing the right thing, and about the concept of the value of integrity. It's critically important, and I think in any business, but especially in ours, because we look at our partners, like our vendors, as partners. We look at our members as us needing to represent their best interests. Same with our employees. So I'm just curious, if there's any words of either advice or insight that you could offer our employees about how you think about integrity as a business person and a leader.
I learned years back from a former manager that I worked with. They ingrained in me that there's doing the right thing, and then there's doing the right thing when no one's looking. And I thought, I've thought about that a lot over my career, and I've preached that to those who I work with, to really make sure that what you're doing, you want to make sure. Sure, it's easy to walk by something, maybe a piece of trash on the floor, and no one's going to notice you don't pick it up. But the simple thing of picking up that piece of trash when no one's looking or no one's expecting you to do that, that says a lot about somebody. And I think that's one of the lessons that I've learned. Integrity is critical in our business. I mean, again, and I've also learned that it's very important to let people know that we're going to make mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. We're all, we're not machines.
No, we learn from mistakes.
We learn from mistakes. We have to understand that, buyers, if a buyer isn't making mistakes, the buyer isn't buying some bad items occasionally, they're not doing their job. And so it's important to understand that mistakes are going to happen. We learn from the mistakes.
Buy bad items.
No, I mean, of course, that's not the goal, but you've got to try. And sometimes you have to go out on a ledge and try something, again, a little risky. But again, I mean, we've had operators try to do some things, kind of go a little bit out of the boundaries that, we give a lot of latitude, but sometimes, someone may go a little bit further than that. And you know what? You could easily terminate somebody for doing that. But we typically, we sit back with that employee and we talk about, what did you learn? And then again, another experience from the past is a buyer made a big mistake and, it cost the company some money. And so the initial reaction is, well, we should, either let that buyer go and not, the funny thing is the person looked at me and say, well, why would you fire that person? You just invested $50,000 in them because the mistake cost $50,000. And I took from that and I go, you're right. So it's very, very important that I think, integrity means doing the right thing, try to do the right thing when no one's looking. But again, also be that type of person that when people make mistakes, you're there to support them.
Or if you made a mistake, just own it.
Own up to it, admit it. Again, and go back. I can tell you another funny story real quickly. Going back to my early days, again, in the early days, we were, as managers, we were judged heavily on what's called shrink, which is unexplained losses. And we would do physical inventories twice a year. And one day, my physical inventory auditor, who I met with every week, came to me and said, "John, we're missing a pallet of," this was Kodak Instamatic film. So again, I'm dating myself here, but
What's film? Oh, just kidding.
yeah, exactly. So, and I'm like, that's impossible. That's $3,500. There's no way that somebody walked out with $3,500 worth of, the Polaroid Instamatic film.
Okay.
So,
The little sheets.
yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, they made a comeback. They made a comeback. I mean, you could still buy those cameras today.
Yeah.
But the thing was, as a club manager, I was like, oh my God, how can I tell my boss? How can I tell him that this happened? Because we were very, very conscientious of our shrink, making sure that we, stayed within the company numbers. But I had to give my boss, that was a tough call. But I called him that night. It was Neil Harris at the time. And I said, "Neil, I've got to tell you something. We've lost some merchandise. It's about $3,500. And then we've gone through the paperwork. We're not sure. We're still trying to research it. Obviously, we never found out what happened. But the reality is, it's a lot easier to admit your mistake than to try to cover up your mistake. And, we've had many experiences through our management where we've unfortunately had to let go of some people that made mistakes that were forgivable mistakes. And again, if you would have come clean and said, "Listen, we made a mistake. I don't know what happened," or, "We're missing 10 TVs. Okay, let's figure out what happened." But unfortunately, sometimes people, they don't take that approach and they try to cover up the mistake. And again, the mistake is always a lot worse covering up the mistake is usually worse than the mistake itself.
No, totally. Those are, it's teachable, but it's not easy to teach. I mean, I always talk about, it's a lot easier to teach skills, but it's not easy to teach attitude. Not easy to teach character, but I think it can be learned. But certainly for us, it's very important. And when we hire people and when we identify people that we should promote for our company, that's critical. And that leads to the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is about identifying talent. You have shown through the years to be very good at identifying not only high performers, but maybe more importantly, people that could become high performers. I look at companies like Costco, or not just companies, but also great coaches in sports, that they're able to take mediocre to okay players and make them great. And I look at our business, like I aspire to be able to do that with people in our company, because I don't think, it's not rocket science, it's retail. And I think it's learnable, but I'm curious about, what do you look for? You're looking for talent, and so advice for people that are managing teams on the things that they should look for.
I would say, well, I'll give you my best shot here.
Right.
I would say, as a manager who manages a team of employees, you first off, you have to engage with your employees. You have to get to know them. You can't just manage from a distance. I think you have to have a certain, at a distance, a relationship with each employee where you understand them.
And of course, professional,
exactly. But understanding, listen, you know what we ask of our people is hard.
Yeah.
The employees at the club, we work hard. Our folks work very, very hard. But what I've always tried to do is try to identify the diamond in the rough. And that is that person that, seems to want to go the extra mile, seems to want to, not necessarily, doesn't need to be the person who works the longest amount of hours, but it's the person who's trying a little bit harder, who is, again, not just stopping when, I can't solve a problem, but trying to figure out a problem. And when you find somebody and you identify somebody that has that type of talent, and this is something we've been, preaching and talking the talk, but walking the talk for many, many years in the operations side of our business is for our managers to identify that talent. And when you identify talent, then you need to start mentoring that talent. And it's very, very important that takes a lot of time and energy. But mentoring those individuals is important. I'm not saying that you have to create the perfect alter ego, as we like to say sometimes, but I think trying to instill in them the values that you find to be important, that have led to your success, sharing those with those individuals and encouraging, but again, at times, if disciplining is necessary, it's necessary.
Yeah.
But you know what? They fall down, you pick them up, you dust them off, and off they go again.
Yeah.
And I think, I think Chris Sharada has done an amazing job
Yeah.
of following,
That's the
that-
person that currently
that
is
credo.
in the previous position.
Exactly. I mean, and when I think of those type of individuals, and we have many of those individuals, but Chris stands out because I think if there's any one individual within our organization that has really done a good job of identifying that talent and then working with that talent and developing that talent, I would say it's Chris. And a lot of people have learned from Chris's style how to do it. So again, for me, I think, a lot of the basic fundamentals that we all talk about, you treat somebody like you would want to be treated. You know what? You set the expectations. You're there to coach. You're there to be what we all like to say is the subservient leader. And that's another key attribute that I look for in somebody who's willing to do something that maybe it's not within their job title, but they're doing it to help somebody else.
Yeah.
Those are the characteristics that stand out in individuals.
Totally.
And it's not always the best buyer that's going to make the best manager, or the best forklift driver that's going to make the best merchandise manager. And we've made those mistakes in the past. There's other attributes you have to look for and then work with. So again, a lot of it's just come over learning over time.
Yeah. I mean, it's
an experience.
people business.
It truly is. It
Yeah.
truly is.
Club business is
It is. And that, if you're not into that, and I like to have tell my, people all the time, listen, if you don't enjoy working with people, helping people, teach people, you're in the wrong business.
may not see the business.
You may not be in the business you want to be in.
No, it's a human capital heavy business. I think all retail companies are. They require, especially more traditional big box club. Now of course Amazon and some chains in China are experimenting with fully automated stores and so on. But I think that's fine, and maybe there's a place for that in the high convenience industry, small format, and like say a 7-Eleven or something.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things when I look at our business that I think separates us, sure, we have an online business. We understand the convenience needs of our members. We have third-party marketplace partners like Rappi and Uber Eats. I get all that. But I think part of what we offer, and I think it's important for our listeners to know, is that it's also about the experience that the person has. It's not just shopping for utility. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to find things you didn't know that we had. You're supposed to get samples. You're supposed to get to talk to the vendor that's having the roadshow and learn about a new product that maybe we only have at our club that other people don't have. So I look at it as much more than just shopping.
Oh, absolutely.
For our members.
And again, one of the key differences that we like to always, talk to our people about is we're very, very different than the traditional retailer. Why? People pay to shop. We ask people to pay to shop at our environment. So the expectations are a lot higher. And that experience, our expectations of that experience, have to be higher.
I totally agree. We visited 2 locations today.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Usaken in the northern part of the city and in Salitre close to the airport. And I was energized by what I saw today in both locations. The merchandise was excellent. Items I hadn't seen before. Employees were highly engaged. I mean, to me, that's as good as what exists on this planet in retail.
So David, first off, I appreciate hearing that. I mean, we have an amazing team here in Colombia, but I like to think we have a pretty much equally amazing team in most all of our other markets as well. We have people that value their careers at PriceSmart. So many of them have started at a lower level and worked up to where they are today. They take so much pride in their work. And to your point, there's nothing more energizing than spending a day like we spent today.
So fun.
I mean, you really sense the passion, the ownership. And, there's a key metric, and I'm not going to get into the percentages, but one of the key metrics that we look at to see how we're treating our employees is really our turnover rate. And in our industry, in the retail industry, it's usually pretty high, and we're probably one of the lowest in the industry.
Yeah.
And again, that comes from doing the right thing for your employee.
100%. Paying good salaries, giving good benefits.
Creating a good work environment.
That's right. Where people are respected, where they have a chance to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great employee experiences generate great customer experiences.
Absolutely. And I think someone named Saul Price said that one day. Same. Yeah. So
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Hey, so,
Right.
just kind of getting into a couple questions as we start to come towards close. Just want to ask about your personal life. Anything you want to share? Any hobbies? What do you like to do? I know you like to work, but what do you do when you're not working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about the day that like I said, hang up the boots, and I'm like, wow, what am I going to do? So I enjoy tennis. I enjoy golf. I enjoy spending time on the water, doing a little fishing occasionally. I love the outdoors. I truly enjoy the outdoors. I mean, one day a dream would be just to hook up a Airstream to the back of my pickup truck and just go visit every state in the union and spend some time in Alaska.
Like John Steinbeck.
Like Giant Snipe. Exactly. I mean, to me, I think, when you get to, at least this is how I look at it, I've sacrificed a lot. And a lot of us have. And I think that's another very, very call out is all of us have sacrificed a lot. When I say sacrifice, our families have sacrificed. They've given up a lot for our success as well. Time away from children, time away from your spouse, your significant other. And that's very, very important. And one of my goals, one day is I feel I have a debt, to make up in that regards. And I want to make sure that I spend, the appropriate amount of time with my kids and my loved ones.
That's very profound. I think you're right. People sacrifice a lot for our company.
They do. They truly do.
And I think about almost every city in Latin America is plagued by terrible traffic.
Yeah.
People spend hours.
Yeah. Commuting to work is not fun. And
right. Or, there's been civil unrest in some cases.
Sometimes it's not safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People walk miles to get to work, and not that they have to, but that they feel committed to.
Again, we could tell some stories about
a lot of we'll do a second episode. Maybe it could still be the last episode of the season. You could.
David, I would be honored to continue on.
Good to know. We'll do that one in Spanish.
Well, we could give it a shot, but we might need some subtitles.
Okay, don't worry. So, I always, since I know we're going to do another episode, we can start to wrap it up because we're coming up on time, but I always ask, our guests, to share something that they've learned from somebody at our company in the last year or so that made an impact, a positive impact on you, and what that is.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'll mention something right now and this is very recent. I mean, very, very recent, within the last few weeks. But we have one of our senior managers who is going through a very tough personal time right now. Mm-hmm. And again, potentially losing, a family member, their father. And, I've learned that life balance is so important. And I would really, again, if I could do it all over again, I probably would have done it a little differently. And that's time lost. But again, what I'm seeing this individual go through now really makes me reflect on, making sure that our people take that very, very seriously. That, work is important, but, your life balance and time with family and loved ones is critical as well. So, I'll try to think of a better answer for the next one, but
I don't know.
That one rings very true, and it's very it's ongoing as we speak. Yeah. So it's very it's tough. It's a tough topic to talk about.
It is a tough topic, but the one thing that we're always short on is time.
Yeah,
because you can't go back on it. Time and biology, if they correlate.
If we could figure that out, let me know.
Yeah, right. Seriously, and maybe somebody in Silicon Valley's figured it out, but surely not here. Well, hey, thank you for everything that you do for our company and for sharing some wonderful stories, some of which I hadn't heard before. I always think, I'm like, man, I must have heard every story that John. Nope. And I'm sure there's others.
No, there's some we
shouldn't share.
We probably could talk personally about.
All right.
Over a beer, but
there you go.
Not today.
No, but thank you for everything that you do for PriceSmart. It's a pleasure to work with you. Pleasure to have you on the podcast. And for our listeners, Thanks for tuning in and joining us today at the club. This is fun. I learned a lot. One of the things that Spotify recently put on their page is you can leave comments. And I always say, hey, I want to hear from you. You can email me, but you can also leave comments. So it's a new function on Spotify. Not that new anymore, maybe 6 months a year, but it's there. So if you have any comments, we'd love to hear from you. And we look forward to seeing you next time at the Club podcast.